My wife called me financially abusive for the third time this month, and I finally realized she wasn't joking. We were standing in our kitchen, surrounded by her latest shopping haul from Nordstrom, and she had the audacity to tell me I was controlling her by asking why she needed 4 designer handbags in 1 week. Let me paint you the picture of how we got here. When we first got married 2 years ago, she was different. She worked as a marketing coordinator making around $38,000 a year, which isn't bad money. She was reasonable, down to earth, even helped split some of the bills. But somewhere along the way, my salary became her personal playground. I make good money, I won't lie about that. But watching someone transform into a completely different person because of it, that was something I never saw coming. The woman I married would grab lunch at Chipotle and call it a treat. Now she won't eat anywhere that doesn't have valet parking. It started small. A few expensive dinners here and there, some designer clothes for special occasions. I didn't mind. I loved spoiling her. But then it escalated. Every week brought new packages from Saks, Tiffany, or some boutique I'd never heard of. When I'd ask about the purchases, she'd get defensive. "Are you seriously going to monitor every dollar I spend?" she'd snap. This is what financial abuse looks like. Financial abuse. That phrase became her weapon of choice whenever I dared to question anything. Bought a $3,000 purse without mentioning it? Financial abuse to ask about it. Spent $800 on a single dinner with her girlfriends? Financial abuse to suggest that was excessive. But here's what really got to me. While she was calling me abusive in private, she was living it up in public. I started noticing her social media posts, the way she'd casually mention expensive restaurants to her friends, how she'd show off the jewelry I bought her like trophies. She wasn't ashamed of the spending. She was proud of it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. She walked in with bags from 3 different stores, totaling over $2,000 according to the receipts she left on the counter. When I asked what the occasion was, she looked at me like I'd slapped her. "Here we go again," she said, rolling her eyes. Can't a woman buy herself nice things without being interrogated by her financially abusive husband? That word again. Abusive. Something inside me went cold, but not in the way she expected. Instead of backing down like I usually did, I pulled out my phone. "Say that again," I told her, hitting record. She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "What are you doing?" "Documenting. Since you keep using that word, I figure I should probably have a record of exactly when and why you're calling me abusive. You know, just in case." The color drained from her face. "You can't record me without my permission." "Actually, I can. One-party consent state, remember? But hey, if you're so confident in your accusations, why does it matter?" She tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back. For the first time in months, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before, uncertainty. "Delete that," she demanded. "Why? If I'm really financially abusive, shouldn't you want evidence? Isn't that what victims are supposed to do?" She couldn't answer that. Instead, she stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. But the damage was done. Not to me, but to whatever game she thought she was playing. That night, I sat in my office and really looked at our bank statements for the first time in months. What I saw made my stomach turn. She'd spent more in the last 3 months than most people make in a year. Designer clothes, expensive meals, spa treatments, jewelry, all while working her regular job and contributing nothing to household expenses. But the real kicker came when I checked her phone records. Not because I was snooping, but because we shared a family plan and I needed to see the usage. What I found were dozens of screenshots she'd sent to her friends. Pictures of her designer bags with captions like, "Hubby spoiled me again," and "living my best life thanks to my man." She wasn't embarrassed about the money I spent on her. She was bragging about it. To everyone except me. Right then, I made a decision that would change everything. If she wanted to call me financially abusive every time I questioned her spending, then I'd give her something real to document. Not abuse, but accountability. I started screenshotting everything. Her social media posts about expensive dinners. Her text messages to friends showing off purchases. Every receipt, every bank statement, every credit card charge. If she was going to play the victim, then I was going to be the most prepared defendant in history. The next morning, she came downstairs like nothing had happened. Designer coffee cup in hand, wearing a $500 blouse I didn't remember buying. "Good morning, honey," she said sweetly, as if she hadn't called me abusive 12 hours earlier. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been organizing digital files. "Morning. Hey, quick question. That dinner you posted about yesterday with your friends at the Capitol Grill. Was that the $800 meal from our account? Her smile faltered. We've talked about this. No, we haven't. You accused me of financial abuse and then ran away. That's not talking. That's deflecting. I don't have to justify every purchase to you. You're right. You don't. But you also don't get to call me abusive for asking basic questions about money that comes from my paycheck. She opened her mouth to respond, probably with another accusation, but I held up my phone again. Please, continue. I'm documenting everything now, remember? She closed her mouth and grabbed her purse instead. I'm late for work. Have a great day, sweetheart. Try not to spend more than you make. The look she gave me could have melted steel, but for the first time in months, I didn't care. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as nothing more than an ATM with feelings. And if she wanted to paint me as the villain in her story, then I'd make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of victim she really was. 3 weeks into my documentation project, I had enough evidence to prosecute a federal case. What I discovered about my wife's spending habits and her conversations with friends made my blood boil, but I kept my cool. Every screenshot, every receipt, every recording was another nail in the coffin she was building for herself. The pattern became crystal clear once I started paying attention. She'd spend ridiculous amounts of money, then immediately share photos with her friends, bragging about how well her husband provided for her. But the moment I questioned anything, suddenly I was controlling and financially abusive. Her text messages were the most revealing. I found threads with her sister where she wrote things like, "Just dropped $1,500 at Neiman Marcus. My husband works, so I don't have to worry about money anymore. Some women marry for love. Smart women marry for lifestyle. Smart women marry for lifestyle." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut, but they also gave me clarity about exactly what I was dealing with. Then there were her conversations with her college friends. Screenshots of designer purchases with captions like, "Perks of having a generous husband," and "Living the dream while my friends stress about rent." She even sent pictures of our dining room table covered in shopping bags with the text, "Another successful shopping trip. Thank God I married up." Married up. Not married the man she loved. Married up. But my personal favorite was a voice message she sent to her best friend after one of our arguments. I only heard it because she left her phone on speaker while getting ready for bed. Her exact words were, "He's being such a control freak about money again. I swear, men think they own you just because they pay for things. I told him he was being financially abusive, and he got all weird about it. Like, hello, that's literally what it is when you try to control someone's spending." I recorded that entire message with my phone. Her own voice, clearly stating that she was weaponizing serious accusations to manipulate me into silence. The shopping receipts told their own story. In 1 month alone, $4,000 at Louis Vuitton, $2,200 at a spa in Beverly Hills, $1,800 on a single dinner for 6 people at some celebrity chef restaurant, and $3,000 on what she called work clothes that were clearly designed for Instagram photo shoots, not marketing meetings. Meanwhile, she contributed exactly $0 to our mortgage, utilities, groceries, or any other household expenses. Her entire $38,000 salary went straight into her personal account for spending money. During this time, she ramped up the financial abuse accusations. Every conversation about money became a lecture about how I was trying to control her. She started using terms she'd obviously Googled, talking about economic coercion and financial imprisonment. One evening, she came home with a $2,000 watch, and I made the mistake of asking if there was a special occasion. "There you go again," she said, not even looking up from her phone, questioning every little thing I do with money. "This is textbook financial abuse, and I'm documenting it." "You're documenting it?" I almost laughed. "What exactly are you documenting?" "The fact that I asked a question. I'm keeping track of every time you try to make me feel guilty for spending money. My therapist says financial abusers always start small, making their victims feel bad about normal purchases." Her therapist. She'd been painting me as an abuser to a licensed professional based on me asking basic questions about outrageous spending. "What did you tell your therapist exactly?" I asked. "The truth. That you monitor my spending, question my purchases, and try to make me feel guilty for buying things I need." Things you need. Like a $2,000 watch. "See? There it is again. You're proving my point." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Okay, let's get this straight. You spent $2,000 on a watch using money I earned. without discussing it with me first. When I ask about it, that makes me financially abusive. Stop recording me. Answer the question. Is asking about a $2,000 purchase financial abuse? She couldn't answer because we both knew how ridiculous it sounded when said out loud. Instead, she tried a different approach. I work too, you know. I contribute to this marriage. Your entire salary doesn't even cover half of what you spent last month. And you don't pay a single household bill. That's not how marriages work. We're supposed to be partners. Partners don't call each other abusive for asking reasonable questions. She stormed out of the room, but not before I caught her muttering under her breath about how she shouldn't have to live like this. That weekend, I made a discovery that changed everything. She was getting ready for another shopping trip with her friends when she left her phone on the bathroom counter. A text came in from her sister that made my blood run cold. How much longer are you going to put up with his controlling behavior? You should talk to a lawyer about documenting his financial abuse. Could be useful in a divorce. A divorce. She was already planning an exit strategy while spending my money like it was going out of style. But the next message was even worse. I've been thinking about it. If I can prove financial abuse, I might be able to get spousal support even though we haven't been married that long. Especially if I can show he made me financially dependent on him. Made her financially dependent. She had a job making $38,000 a year and chose not to pay any bills. That wasn't dependence, that was strategy. I screenshotted both messages and added them to my growing collection of evidence. But I also realized something important. She wasn't just spending my money carelessly. She was building a case for divorce while positioning herself as the victim. Two could play that game, except I was going to play it better. That evening, she came home from her shopping trip with her usual haul of bags and boxes. But this time I was ready. How was shopping? I asked casually. Fine. Just picked up a few things. Define a few. Because I'm seeing charges for over $3,000 on our account. Her face went red. Here we go again with the money monitoring. Actually, let's talk about monitoring. Since you mentioned documenting my behavior, I figured I should start documenting yours too. I pulled out a folder filled with printed screenshots and receipts. These are your text messages to friends bragging about spending my money. These are receipts showing you've spent more in 3 months than most families spend in a year. And this, I held up my phone, is a recording of you admitting that you call me financially abusive to shut down reasonable questions. The color drained from her face. You can't use any of that. Why not? If you're really the victim of financial abuse, shouldn't you want all the facts to come out? She couldn't respond because there was no response. She'd been caught red-handed, and we both knew it. Delete those, she finally said. No. See, the thing about actual documentation is that it tells the whole story, not just the parts that make you look like a victim. That night, she didn't come to bed until well after midnight. And when she did, she lay there staring at the ceiling like she was trying to figure out her next move. Good. Let her think. Because while she was planning her divorce strategy, I was building an airtight case that would expose exactly what kind of victim she really was. The explosion came exactly 1 week later, triggered by what she probably thought was a routine purchase. She walked through the door carrying a small Cartier bag, trying to hide it behind her purse like I wouldn't notice the distinctive red ribbon. I was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, surrounded by organized files of evidence I'd been building against her. When she saw my setup, her face went pale. "What's all this?" she asked, nodding toward the papers and folders. "Research. You'll understand in a minute. But first, tell me about the Cartier bag." Her grip tightened on the small bag. "It's nothing. Just a small gift for myself. A small gift. From Cartier. That charged $4,200 to our joint account." The number hit her like a slap. She clearly hadn't expected me to check the account so quickly. I work hard. I deserve nice things. You work hard spending money you didn't earn on things you don't need while calling the person who pays for it all abusive. Don't start this again. Start what? Asking questions about a $4,200 purchase? Let me guess. That makes me financially abusive again, right? She set the bag down on the counter with more force than necessary. You know what? Yes, it does. Normal husbands don't interrogate their wives over every purchase. Normal wives don't spend more than they make while contributing nothing to household expenses. I contribute plenty to this marriage. Name one bill you pay. 1. Go ahead. She opened her mouth, then closed it. We both knew she couldn't name a single expense she covered. That's not the point, she finally said. Marriage is about partnership, not keeping score. Partnership. I picked up a printed screenshot from my pile. Is this partnership? Your text to your sister saying smart women marry for lifestyle, not love. Her face went white as I held up the evidence. You went through my phone? I didn't have to. You left it on speaker. But since we're talking about going through things, let's discuss what I found. I spread several printouts across the table like playing cards. Text messages bragging to friends about spending my money. Social media posts showing off purchases with captions about how well I provide for you. And my personal favorite, I held up another screenshot. Your conversation with your sister about using financial abuse accusations to get spousal support in a divorce. The silence in the room was deafening. She stared at the evidence like it was written in a foreign language. That's not what that meant, she whispered. Really? Because it seems pretty clear. You've been planning to divorce me while positioning yourself as a victim of financial abuse. All while spending money like you're trying to single-handedly support the luxury goods industry. You're twisting everything. I'm reading your own words back to you. She tried a different approach, her voice taking on that manipulative tone I'd grown to hate. Look, maybe we both said things we didn't mean. We can work through this. Couples therapy, better communication. Better communication? You mean like when you told your therapist I was financially abusing you? Her mouth fell open. She'd forgotten I knew about that. Or maybe you mean better communication like planning my financial destruction with your sister behind my back. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain to me how plotting to claim spousal support based on false abuse allegations is good communication. She couldn't explain it because there was no explanation that didn't make her look exactly like what she was, a manipulative gold digger who'd gotten caught. I think you should leave, she said finally. I laughed. Actually laughed. I should leave? This is my house. I pay the mortgage, the utilities, the insurance, the taxes. You want me to leave the house I pay for because you got caught lying? Fine. Then I'll leave. With what money? Your salary that you blow on designer handbags every month. The reality of her situation was finally hitting her. She'd been living so far beyond her means for so long that she'd forgotten what her actual financial situation looked like without me. You can't just cut me off, she said, desperation creeping into her voice. Watch me. I pulled out my phone and opened our banking app. With a few taps, I removed her access to our joint accounts. What are you doing? Giving you what you want. Financial independence. No more financial abuse from your controlling husband. You can't do this. Actually, I can. These are my accounts that I graciously gave you access to. Consider that access revoked. She lunged for my phone, but I was ready for it. I stepped back and held it out of reach. Give me back my access. Your access to what? Money you didn't earn? Money you've been using while plotting against me. I'll report this to the police. Report what? That I restricted access to my own bank accounts? Good luck with that. The panic in her eyes was real now. She was finally understanding that her carefully constructed lifestyle was about to come crashing down. We can fix this, she said, her voice breaking. I'll change. I'll stop spending so much. We can go to counseling. Counseling? With the therapist you've been lying to about me being financially abusive. I'll find a new therapist. We can start over. There is no starting over. You showed me exactly who you are, and I believe you. I gathered up all the evidence from the table and put it back in its folder. What are you going to do with all that? She asked. Well, since you've been planning to divorce me and claim spousal support based on financial abuse allegations, I figured I should be prepared to defend myself. I wasn't really going to do that. The text messages say otherwise. She stood there in our kitchen, designer clothes, $4,200 jewelry, surrounded by shopping bags, and finally realized that her house of cards was collapsing. So what happens now? She whispered. I looked at her. This stranger who'd replaced the woman I married, and felt nothing but cold determination. Now you get exactly what you've been telling everyone you want. Freedom from your financially abusive husband. I don't want a divorce. Too bad. Because I do. The next morning, I had divorce papers drawn up. Not because I was angry, though I was. Not because I was hurt, though I was that too. But because I finally understood that the woman I married was gone. Replaced by someone who saw me as nothing more than a means to fund a lifestyle she could never afford on her own. She thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. But she'd forgotten one crucial thing. I was the one with all the pieces. The divorce papers were served on a Thursday morning while she was getting ready for work. I wasn't there to see her reaction, But I heard about it from the process server who said she went completely ballistic and tried to refuse the documents. When I got home that evening, she was waiting for me in the living room with red eyes and tissues scattered around her like confetti. The desperate, manipulative woman from the night before had been replaced by someone trying to play the victim card one more time. "We need to talk," she said, her voice shaky. "Actually, we don't. My lawyer will handle all communication from now on. You can't be serious about this. It's just money. Just money." After months of calling me financially abusive for questioning her spending, now it was just money. "You're right. It is just money. Your money problems, specifically." She stood up, pacing around the room like a caged animal. "I've been thinking about everything, and maybe I overreacted. We can set up a budget, track expenses together. I'll be more mindful. More mindful. Like when you were mindfully planning to divorce me and claim spousal support. That was just venting to my sister. I didn't mean it. The screenshots say otherwise." For the next hour, she cycled through every manipulation tactic in the book. Tears, anger, bargaining, more tears, promises to change, threats to take half of everything. But I'd already heard this performance before, and I wasn't buying tickets to the encore. 3 days later, the real surprise came. I was at work when my lawyer called with news that made my blood pressure spike. "She filed a counterclaim," he said, "seeking spousal support based on claims of financial abuse and coercion." Even though I'd seen it coming, hearing it made official still felt like a punch to the gut. "How much is she asking for?" $4,000 a month for 3 years. $4,000 a month. More than her take-home pay. She wanted me to fund the same lifestyle she'd been living, except now she'd be doing it as my ex-wife. "She's also claiming you made her financially dependent by discouraging her from advancing her career." I almost laughed. Discouraging her career? She works in marketing and spends more on lunch than most people spend on groceries. That's not all. She's alleging that you controlled all the finances and didn't allow her access to marital funds. I have screenshots of her bragging about having unlimited access to spending money. Good. We'll need those. But there's more. She's claiming you isolated her from friends and family by making her too embarrassed about your financial control to socialize. The audacity was breathtaking. The woman who spent $800 on dinner with friends was claiming I isolated her from socializing. When's the hearing? 6 weeks. But I need to warn you, these cases can get messy. Financial abuse allegations are taken seriously by courts, even when they're fabricated. Then it's a good thing I documented everything. That evening, she was waiting for me again, but this time her approach was different. She'd traded the victim act for fake confidence. "I hope you're happy," she said. "Now we both have lawyers, and this is going to get expensive. Only expensive for one of us. I'm not the one asking for $4,000 a month in handouts. It's not a handout. It's spousal support. I'm entitled to maintain the lifestyle I became accustomed to during our marriage. The lifestyle you became accustomed to was funded by money you didn't earn while you contributed nothing to our household. I contributed emotional support, companionship, domestic duties." Domestic duties? When's the last time you cooked dinner, did laundry, or cleaned anything? "We have a housekeeper because you said cleaning was beneath you." She couldn't answer that either, so she tried a different angle. "The court will see through your vindictive behavior. You're trying to punish me financially because I stood up to your abuse." Standing up to abuse. Is that what you call spending $4,200 on jewelry while planning to divorce me? "I'm not discussing this with you anymore. My lawyer will handle everything." Good. Because your lawyer is going to have a very interesting time explaining your text messages about marrying for lifestyle instead of love. Her confident facade cracked just enough for me to see the panic underneath. Over the next few weeks, I watched her scramble to maintain her lifestyle on her actual salary. The daily Starbucks run stopped. The designer lunch spots were replaced with packed salads from home. The constant stream of shopping bags slowed to a trickle, but she wasn't going down without a fight. Her social media suddenly became filled with vague posts about surviving financial abuse and rebuilding after manipulation. She was crafting a narrative for public consumption, probably hoping it would somehow help her case. The problem was, I had screenshots of her old posts too. Posts about being grateful for her generous husband, pictures of expensive gifts with heart emojis, check-ins at luxury restaurants with captions about feeling blessed. The contrast was going to be devastating in court. 2 weeks before the hearing, she made one last desperate attempt at reconciliation. She showed up at my office during lunch, dressed in one of the designer outfits I'd paid for, carrying flowers. "I made a mistake," she said when I reluctantly agreed to talk to her in the parking lot. "I got caught up in spending and lost sight of what really matters." What really matters? Us. Our marriage. Our future together. Our future where you spend my money while calling me abusive. I'll pay you back every penny. I'll get a second job, work weekends, whatever it takes. Pay me back with what? You can't even afford your car payment without my help. We can work out a payment plan. The desperation was pathetic, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no second thoughts. She'd shown me exactly who she was when she thought she held all the cards. The only thing we're working out is property division and your failed attempt to get spousal support. Don't do this. Please. I know I messed up, but people make mistakes. Mistakes are accidents. You planned this. You strategized, manipulated, and lied. That's not a mistake. That's character. She started crying again, but they were calculated tears designed to manipulate, not genuine remorse. "I have evidence of everything," I continued. "Your spending, your lies to your therapist, your plans to divorce me, your bragging to friends about spending my money. Your own words are going to bury you in court. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. Something you might want to try for once." As I walked away, she called after me. "You'll regret this. The court will see what kind of man you really are." She was right about one thing. The court was definitely going to see what kind of person someone really was. But it wasn't going to be me. The courtroom felt like a theater on opening night, except the performance was about to be a one-sided massacre. She sat at the defendant's table wearing a modest outfit I'd never seen before, probably borrowed since she couldn't afford new clothes anymore. Her lawyer looked confident, probably thinking he had a slam-dunk case of financial abuse. They had no idea what was coming. Her lawyer went first, painting a picture of a controlling husband who monitored every dollar and psychologically abused his wife through financial manipulation. He talked about isolation, coercion, and dependency. For 20 minutes, he made me sound like a monster who trapped an innocent woman in a cage of economic control. "Your Honor, my client was systematically stripped of financial autonomy and made to feel guilty for basic necessities. When she tried to assert any independence, she was met with accusations, interrogations, and ultimately complete financial abandonment." Then it was our turn. My attorney stood up with a tablet and a thick folder that made her lawyer's confident smile disappear. "Your Honor, the defendant has painted a compelling picture of abuse. Unfortunately for her, it's completely fabricated, and we have extensive evidence to prove it." He connected his tablet to the courtroom's display screen. Let's start with the defendant's own words about her marriage. The first screenshot filled the screen. Her text to her sister. "Some women marry for love. Smart women marry for lifestyle." The judge's eyebrows went up. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. This was sent 3 months after the wedding, showing the defendant's true motivation for marriage wasn't love, but financial gain. More screenshots followed. Her bragging to friends about expensive purchases. Social media posts showing off designer goods with captions about having a generous husband. Voice messages to friends about living the dream while others stressed about rent. These communications show someone celebrating unlimited access to funds, not someone being financially controlled. Then came the spending records. Month by month, purchase by purchase, displayed on a spreadsheet that made the courtroom gasp audibly. In 6 months, she'd spent more than $60,000 on personal luxuries, while contributing $0 to household expenses. The defendant claims she was made financially dependent, Your Honor. In reality, she chose not to contribute to any household expenses despite earning $38,000 annually. Her entire salary went to personal spending money while the plaintiff covered 100% of living costs. Her lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off. She wanted to see where this was going. The audio recordings came next. Her own voice calling me financially abusive for asking about purchases, then immediately pivoting to brag about the same purchases to friends. The contrast was devastating, but the real knockout punch came with the text message thread between her and her sister about divorce strategy. "I might be able to get spousal support even though we haven't been married that long, especially if I can show he made me financially dependent on him." The courtroom went dead silent. Even her own lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. "This shows premeditation, Your Honor. The defendant wasn't a victim of financial abuse. She was strategically positioning herself to claim abuse as grounds for spousal support, while simultaneously bragging about unlimited spending access. My attorney pulled up bank records showing the $4,200 Cartier purchase that triggered our final argument. On the same day she made this purchase, the defendant told friends via text that she deserved nice things because her husband works so she doesn't have to worry about money. Yet when questioned about this purchase, she claimed financial abuse. The judge leaned forward. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. The defendant spent over $4,000 in a single day, bragged about it to friends, then claimed abuse when her husband asked about it. That's correct, Your Honor. And we have documentation of this pattern occurring repeatedly over several months. Her lawyer tried damage control during cross-examination, but it was like trying to stop a tsunami with an umbrella. Every question he asked gave my attorney another opportunity to present more evidence. Your Honor, my client may have made some poor choices with spending, but that doesn't negate the psychological abuse she endured. My attorney pulled up the screenshots of her therapy sessions aftermath. The defendant claims psychological abuse, but here are her own text messages describing how she manipulated her therapist by presenting only selective information about their financial discussions. More texts appeared on screen showing her coaching friends on how to handle controlling husbands by using therapy terminology. She wasn't seeking help for abuse, Your Honor. She was weaponizing therapeutic language to justify unlimited spending. The final blow came when my attorney played the recording of our last argument, where her mask completely slipped. You can hear the defendant's voice clearly stating that she shouldn't have to live like this, referring to being asked questions about spending. This is immediately followed by her demanding continued access to funds she didn't earn for purchases she couldn't justify. When it was her turn to testify, she tried to stick to the abuse narrative, but every answer was contradicted by her own documented words. Her lawyer looked like he was questioning his career choices. Ma'am, you testified that you felt controlled and isolated. Can you explain these social media posts showing expensive dinners with friends multiple times per week? Those weren't that expensive. According to credit card records, this dinner cost $847 for 6 people. You paid for everyone using your husband's account, then posted about it with heart emojis and gratitude captions. I was just being nice to my friends. With money you didn't earn, while claiming your husband was financially abusive for questioning such expenses? She couldn't answer without admitting the entire abuse narrative was fabricated. The judge had heard enough. I've seen many cases of legitimate financial abuse, and this isn't one of them. The evidence shows a pattern of manipulation, deception, and strategic positioning for financial gain, not victimization. Her face went white. The defendant had unlimited access to marital funds, contributed nothing to household expenses despite substantial personal income, and documented her own plans to use false abuse allegations for financial advantage in divorce proceedings. The gavel came down like thunder. Spousal support is denied. The defendant's claims of financial abuse are not only unsupported by evidence, they are directly contradicted by her own documented statements and behavior. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, given the clear evidence of deceptive practices and false allegations, I'm awarding attorney fees to the plaintiff. The defendant will be responsible for all legal costs associated with defending against these frivolous claims. Her lawyer whispered something urgent in her ear. She looked like she was about to faint. Additionally, I'm recommending this case be reviewed for potential perjury charges, as the defendant's testimony under oath contradicts substantial documentary evidence. Game over. As we left the courtroom, she tried one last desperate approach. This isn't over, she said. I'll appeal. With what money? I asked. You just got ordered to pay my attorney fees on top of your own. For the first time since I'd known her, she was completely speechless. Her lawyer pulled her aside, probably explaining that appeals cost money she didn't have and wouldn't succeed anyway. I walked out of that courthouse a free man, vindicated not by my words, but by hers. She'd documented her own destruction so thoroughly that even the best lawyer in the world couldn't have saved her. Sometimes the best defense is just letting people show exactly who they are. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into her at Target. Not the designer boutiques she used to frequent, not Whole Foods where she'd buy $100 grocery hauls, but Target. She was pushing a cart with generic brand items and store brand everything. looking like a completely different person from the woman who used to drop thousands without blinking. She saw me before I saw her and tried to duck into another aisle, but it was too late. The encounter was inevitable. "Hey," she said quietly, clearly uncomfortable. "How's the independent life treating you?" I asked. She looked tired. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by basic outfits that probably came from the same store we were standing in. The expensive highlights had grown out, showing her natural hair color. Even her nails, once perfectly manicured weekly at high-end salons, were plain and chipped. "I'm managing," she said, but her voice lacked any conviction. Managing. That was a far cry from the lifestyle she'd claimed she deserved. "I heard you had to move," I said. Her face flushed red. "I found a nice place." Nice place. From what I'd heard through mutual acquaintances, she'd moved from our upscale neighborhood to a studio apartment across town. Her car, the luxury SUV she'd insisted she needed, had been repossessed 3 months after the divorce. Now she drove a decade-old compact car that had seen better days. And work. Still at the same company. Still making the same $38,000 that she'd once claimed was pocket money. Except now it had to cover rent, utilities, groceries, car payments, and all the other expenses she'd never worried about when I was handling everything. The reality check had been brutal and swift. "I should go," she said, starting to push her cart away. "Actually, before you do, I'm curious about something. How are those friends of yours? The ones you used to take to expensive dinners?" Her face went even redder. "They're busy." Busy. Translation: they'd disappeared the moment the gravy train stopped running. The women she'd impressed with designer bags and luxury restaurant tabs had no interest in friendship that didn't come with financial perks. It turned out that when you build relationships based on what you can spend on people, those relationships evaporate when the spending stops. "What about your sister? Still giving you divorce advice?" "She's dealing with her own problems." Her sister, who'd encouraged the divorce strategy and helped plan the spousal support scheme, had distanced herself once the plan backfired spectacularly. Family loyalty apparently had its limits when it came to being associated with someone who'd been publicly exposed as a fraud in court. The legal fees alone had wiped out whatever savings she'd had. Between her attorney costs and the court-ordered payment of my legal expenses, she'd ended up owing more than $20,000. Money she didn't have and couldn't pay. "Well, this was enlightening," I said. "Enjoy your shopping." As I walked away, I heard her call after me. You could have just talked to me. We could have worked things out." I turned back. "Work things out? You mean like when you planned to divorce me and take spousal support while calling me abusive? Or when you told your therapist I was controlling while bragging to friends about unlimited shopping money? Which conversation would have fixed that?" She had no answer because there wasn't one. Some people don't change until they're forced to face consequences, and even then, they usually just blame everyone else for their situation. The truth was, she'd never wanted to work things out. She'd wanted to have her cake and eat it too. Unlimited spending money, no responsibility, and the moral high ground of being a victim. When that fantasy collapsed, she tried to blame me for not enabling it further. 3 months later, I heard she'd started dating someone new, a guy who worked at the same company, made about the same salary she did. From what people told me, she'd completely changed her approach to relationships. No more talk of lifestyles and luxury, no more designer expectations. She'd learned the hard way that when you price yourself out of love, you end up alone and broke. But here's the thing about consequences. They're not punishment, they're education. She'd spent our entire marriage treating me like an ATM while painting herself as a victim whenever I questioned her behavior. Now she was living the life that her actual income could support, and suddenly she understood what financial independence really looked like. It wasn't designer handbags and expensive dinners. It was choosing between premium groceries and gas money. It was shopping at discount stores and clipping coupons. It was realizing that $38,000 a year doesn't go as far as you think when you're actually responsible for paying your own bills. The woman who'd once told her friends that smart women marry for lifestyle was now learning what happens when that lifestyle disappears. She was discovering that marriage based on financial opportunity rather than genuine partnership tends to collapse the moment the opportunity ends. As for me, I was finally free to find someone who wanted to build a life together rather than just enjoy the one I'd already built. Someone who saw marriage as a partnership, not a business transaction. Someone who understood that love isn't measured in shopping receipts and designer labels. The divorce had cost me money, time, and emotional energy. But it had also taught me something invaluable about recognizing manipulation before it takes root. I'd learned to trust actions over words, patterns over promises, and documented behavior over emotional appeals. She'd called me financially abusive for asking reasonable questions about outrageous spending. In the end, the only person who suffered financial abuse in our marriage was me, constantly funding a lifestyle for someone who saw my generosity as weakness and my boundaries as oppression. But the story ended exactly as it should have. She got the financial independence she claimed to want, and I got the freedom to find someone who actually deserved the life I was willing to share. Sometimes the best revenge isn't planning elaborate payback schemes. Sometimes it's just stepping aside and letting people experience the natural consequences of their choices. She'd wanted to play victim while living like royalty. Now she was learning what actual financial struggle looked like. And me? I was learning what it felt like to be truly appreciated by someone who understood the difference between being provided for and being taken advantage of. The woman who traded love for luxury had ended up with neither. That wasn't my doing. That was just mathematics. When you bet everything on someone else's generosity, you lose everything when that generosity runs out. She'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for all along, a life where nobody could financially abuse her by questioning her spending decisions. Because now, finally, she was spending her own money.